Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Retro Gamers Podcast. This is our retro roundup for September 9th, 2025, and I'm joined here by my good friend Rich. Rich, how you doing?
All righty, how you doing? Thanks for having me on again.
Always a pleasure to have you on, especially for this specific roundup because we are celebrating. We are
Mm.
celebrating the 30th retro birthday or 30th anniversary of the US launch of the Sony PlayStation. And I know you
You know
have
that
a
hurts,
yes, we do.
saying that 30 years.
Yes, I think my knee just actually cracked when I said that. But that seems to happen as every year goes by with these birthdays or anniversaries.
Yes.
So, but yes, the Sony PlayStation was released in North America 30 years ago today, September 9th, 1995. And we're going to just dive in on a quick little history of how the Sony PlayStation came to be. We'll talk a little bit about the stats and then just our memories with it, because I know that this was a monumental console for both of us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. For me especially, I would say I know we're going to talk about this, but this is the console that I really remember sitting down and having a lot of fun with friends. So,
Okay, yeah, and I remember the same thing. I also remember, and again, we'll talk a little bit about it later. The leap between generations, console generations. This was like a massive leap from where we were with 16-bit. So,
yes.
but again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, I want to talk about a little bit just the history of how the Sony PlayStation came to be because it was a very, very interesting history, and I'm sure a lot of people know about this, but the PlayStation came about through a deal Sony originally made with Nintendo. And this dates back actually all the way to 1988.
Wow, that
So,
far back?
yeah, it goes back to 1988. So, Sony made a deal with Nintendo at the time, who was in the middle of developing their next system, which was at the Nintendo
Super
and the
Famicom?
yep, the Nintendo and the Famicom was still going strong, and they were working on the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom. At the time, they struck a deal with Sony and contracted them to do the sound processor for the Super Nintendo. And when they contracted them to do that, it led to discussions about adding a CD-ROM peripheral to the Super Nintendo, which Sony said that they would also
Develop.
develop. So they planned on, so the deal was set, or the deal was set, the contract was signed. Sony began development for the CD-ROM peripheral, and it was going to be called the Super Nintendo PlayStation. Now, complications started to rise, not necessarily because of what Sony was doing, but Nintendo started to get a little concerned with the deal they had struck with Sony. Because in the deal, Sony was gonna not only create the PlayStation for the Super Nintendo, but they were also going to release a Sony branded console that would play what they called at the time super discs, right? That's what they called
Mm.
the games. They were called super discs. So Sony was going to release their own version of the console that would also play Super Nintendo cartridges, but under the
Ooh.
Sony brand. So basically, both companies
Mm.
were going to have their own console, but then on
Across.
right, but then on top of that, Sony was going to retain sole international rights to every super disc game that was created for the console, which would be a Nintendo console, right? And we know how Nintendo doesn't like to give up control of things. A-
No, not
And
at
not
all.
only that, but they would also have be the sole benefactor of licensing related to the music and film software for the Super Disc. So Sony, this deal that they struck, Sony was going to have like full control over all of these, all the games and the content. Obviously, this wasn't exactly something Nintendo was comfortable with. So in 1991, when they were ready to make the announcement at the Consumer Electronics Show on day one, Sony executive comes out, announces this deal with Nintendo, saying, "Hey, we're going to be releasing the Super Nintendo PlayStation add-on to this system." And then because Nintendo's president at the time, and this was at Consumer Electronics Shows. He was very worried about how this deal was going to happen. So after day one, or on day one of the Consumer Electronics Show, the Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi, I'm not sure how to say his last name, um, canceled the contract and said, "We're not going to go with you." And the next day, on day two of Consumer Electronics Show, Sony had to come back out and say, "Oh, this is not happening anymore." The deal literally fell through overnight. And then Nintendo walked over to Philips, which was Sony's competitor, and
Hmm.
struck a deal with them to create content on what became the Philips CDI. So, which
Talk
obviously,
about a terrible, terrible
yeah,
decision right there.
yeah, but Nintendo, with the deal they struck with Philips, got what they wanted. They had full creative control over their content on there. It just turns out that the content on there was absolutely terrible.
Yes.
Now, Sony was left with this, what are they going to do with this console? The Sony executives did not want to enter the console market on their own. They really didn't. But one of their executives, Ken Kutaragi, who was working on this whole thing, actually was secretly created a standalone CD-ROM based video game console. And
Hmm.
he convinced the other Sony executives to continue developing it. And when they didn't want to do that, he reminded them of what Nintendo did when by betraying them and walking away from
Yeah.
their deal. And that was enough of an impetus, basically kind of like a revenge thing, to push them forward and fully develop the Sony PlayStation, which is what we got in December of 1994. It actually came out December 3rd, 94 in Japan, and then eventually it was such a
Later
success
in the US.
later in the US on September 9th, 1995, which is what we're celebrating here. Just the one interesting thing about this too is that during that whole time, after Nintendo walked away from Sony, they were still developing the Nintendo PlayStation prototypes up until 1992. So
Oh,
there was
wow.
still some type of deal going on before Nintendo and Sony completely broke it off 100%. So there are actually 200 Nintendo PlayStation prototypes that were made, and they're out there somewhere. I know one recently auctioned off or whatever, for a good amount of money. But PlayStation was a huge hit. Just a couple of quick stats on it. Um, over the course of its lifetime, total sales for the original PlayStation, 102.4 million units sold, which is insane.
Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. Absolutely huge. And again, not to be outdone, but PlayStation 2 blew that out of the water.
Hmm.
But again, Sony PlayStation put Sony on the map, and to come out with your first console and like hit the ground running. Because remember, Sega was still in the market at this time.
Yep.
They were coming out with the Sega Saturn, which was also CD based. The Atari Jaguar, which was saying they were a 64-bit system, even though they weren't. Um,
TurboGrafx.
TurboGrafx, and then obviously the Super Nintendo was still riding strong. The Genesis was riding strong. We had news of the Nintendo 64. There was a lot going on in the industry, and Sony just hit it right out of the park.
Yeah. No. What's funny is kind of going with something you talked about. Now, when did you get your first PlayStation? Did you get it close to launch or did you wait a little bit?
No, I wound up waiting a little bit. What sold me on the PlayStation ultimately, I think, was Final Fantasy VII.
Really? So
I think
97 was you got yours.
I think it was 97. It was a couple of years later.
You and me both.
Yeah.
So what's funny was for me, I remember going to Toys R Us in Brooklyn,
Hmm.
the one by us. And I came down to I was going to buy either the Saturn or the PlayStation. And I remember looking at the games and just kind of going like, the girl I was seeing at the time, her brother had a Saturn,
Okay.
and Saturn was giving away the three games with it. It was
Oh, that's
Virtua
right.
Cop, Daytona, and Virtua Fighter.
Hmm.
And I was just like, you know what? I bought the Saturn.
Yeah.
Biggest
Well,
mistake.
the Saturn wasn't necessarily a bad console. It's just that the library Sony had on the
Yeah.
PlayStation was just unbelievable. But I will say this, when Sony first came out with the console in North America, the launch titles, like looking back on them, weren't exactly, They weren't really a blowout when you look at them. It
What are you
was
talking about? They had Street Fighter the movie, man. Come
Oh
on.
yeah, so and yeah, and just to run through them really quickly, there were 10 games on launch day in North America, and it was Battle Arena Toshinden, ESPN2 Extreme Games.
Oh,
Uh
that sells it right there.
yeah, exactly. Kiliak, the DNA Imperative, which to be honest with you, I haven't heard of until today. NBA Jam Tournament Edition, probably the best one of the bunch. Well, one of
Yep.
two. Power Serve 3D Tennis, Rayman, which I think was probably one of the bigger ones because it
Yep.
was a platformer. Ridge Racer, which I actually have right here in my collection. I bought it. I actually bought it this past weekend to celebrate the launch of the Sony PlayStation. Street Fighter the movie, like you said, the Raiden Project, and Total Eclipse. Those were the 10 games at launch.
Hmm.
Again, a lot of those games probably either you haven't heard of them or you were just like, yeah, I played them. They kind of fell by the wayside, but it was everything else that followed that was just
Hmm.
absolutely huge. Um,
Well, going with, what sold, going with what you were talking about, like what sold you, what sold me to the PlayStation was, my love for Tomb Raider.
oh yeah.
And I remember so my buddy, he had Tomb Raider on the PlayStation and he showed it to me and I was like, oh my God, this game looks amazing.
Hmm.
And then I went and bought it for the Saturn.
Of course.
And I played it, beat it. But then I remember the Coliseum, like it would
Hmm.
just like pop in on the Saturn when you would just kind of go into these larger areas. And then I remember actually like playing it on the PlayStation in the Coliseum. Like it was actually just kind of like I forget the technical term for it, but it
Yeah.
kind of just like, came in like smoothly. And I was like, what is
Yeah.
that? And I
Yeah.
was like,
Well,
wow,
yeah,
that's
because it
kind of
was
cool.
it was like it's the way you would do like as you're walking to something in real life as it starts to come into view as you're getting closer, like same, yeah, like same exact thing. And it was, yeah,
Yep.
and that was a huge difference because the PlayStation was able to process things better.
Yeah.
It was able to process things better, and that's why, and that's why it obviously performed better than the Saturn did.
Yeah.
Um, and needless to say, the top five, I have a list of the top five best-selling games, and you can just see by the numbers like how well these things did.
Hold on.
Top five.
All right. I got to take a guess here.
Well, okay,
Metal
what
Gear,
name one?
Metal Gear Solid is definitely going to be on this list.
You are definitely wrong.
What? Really?
Yeah.
No.
So
Wow.
the top five best-selling games.
Okay.
Number five is Tekken 3 at 8.3 million.
Okay, I could see that.
Number four, Gran Turismo 2, 9.4 million.
Could see
Number
that.
three, Final Fantasy 8,
Eight?
9.6 million. Yes, Final Fantasy 8.
Wow.
Final Fantasy 7, 10.2 million. And then the top selling game on the Sony PlayStation, Gran Turismo, the original, 10.8 million. That's your list.
Wow.
That's your list of best-selling games. And just, and again, Final Fantasy 7 makes total sense because I guarantee you, Final Fantasy 7, I wasn't the only person buying a PlayStation just for that game. I remember the commercials for that game, and I'm like, this is something I feel like I need to play. As somebody who has been gaming at that point for well over a decade, um, I needed to play that game because I felt like this was the next evolutionary leap in video gaming, and this one was going to define it. Between that and Resident Evil, because those were the two games I bought when I got my PlayStation. And as I can see, yes, you are in the mansion. Those were the two games I bought when I got my PlayStation. And holy cow, you want to talk about a 1-2 punch? Resident
Yeah.
Evil and Final Fantasy VII. I mean, you can't ask for two more console defining games.
So for Final Fantasy VII,
Mhm.
one of my coworkers at the time, he came over and he brought it, and I was not impressed.
Wow.
I remember sitting down just being like, it's
But
okay.
but you weren't an RPG guy, right?
I mean, like I dabbled here and there in the dark arts,
Hmm.
but I mean, like to me, the one that I did, and I've talked about it on the show before, is Wild Arms. I bought
Wild
that for
Arms.
$10,
Yep.
and that was the best $10 I ever spent.
There you go. But
And
well,
then
I was gonna say, aside from that, it's like, what are the ones that stick out the most to you? Like when you say PlayStation 1, what are the games?
Well, you nailed the one, Resident Evil.
Yep.
Like to me, that we're playing right. I remember again, one of my coworkers when I told him I bought the PlayStation goes, "You got to get Resident Evil," and I
Yep.
played it, and I was like, "What is this?"
Hmm.
Um, just some other ones, Twisted Metal 2, man. I
Oh,
remember
Twisted
spending
Metal.
hours playing with my buddies playing Twisted
Hmm.
Metal 2. Same thing, Crash Team Racing was another big one that I remember us playing over and over again. I think we talked about this the last time. Spider-Man, the original
Yep.
Spider-Man,
Hmm.
was a great one. I'm a huge. I used to be a huge Madden fan. I used to buy like every single one as they would come out,
Yep.
and I remember buying Madden '99, and that was my first foray into the franchise mode.
Nice.
And I was like, "Oh my God, what do you mean you get to play more than just one season?" And it keeps the stats. I was like, that was
Yep.
awesome. And then just, like just some other ones, Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain, uh, the very first Persona, I remember playing like
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
How can we not mention Tony Hawk, Pro Skater 2?
Oh, Tony Hawk was insane. When by the time that came out, I had actually bought that on the Dreamcast
Really?
instead because yeah, by the time yeah, that was a Dreamcast title for me, unfortunately. But still, it started on the PlayStation and it was just absolutely insane.
So what about you? What about some of your standouts?
Yeah, I was trying to think again, Resident Evil by far, Resident Evil 1 and 2 for me were
Hands down.
yeah, outstanding. I mean, can't beat those. Tomb Raider,
No.
like you said.
Yep.
Tomb Raider I played on my PlayStation, absolutely loved it. Tomb Raider 2 I got stuck on. And actually right now I'm working on Tomb Raider 2 on my PS5. Um,
Mm-hmm.
slowly but surely, but I also remember why I quit because I keep getting stuck. Um, Final Fantasy 7, hands down unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Final Fantasy 8, another good one in the series, not the best one, another good one in the series. And then I said those were like the main ones for me. Like I tried Metal Gear Solid, wasn't my jam. Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, absolutely outstanding. Like you said, the Tony Hawk games were definitely on my list. I'm actually like looking at the list of best-selling games to see what other ones I did. Oh, wrestling games, obviously.
Oh my God. Okay, n not even being a wrestling fan,
Hmm.
I used to love the wrestling games that
Yeah,
were on.
like WWF Warzone, WWF Attitude I had. The WCW versus the World was one of my favorites that I had on there. Oh, also PlayStation introduced me to rhythm-based games because it was on PlayStation where I played Busta Groove
Hmm.
and absolutely loved the format of Busta Groove. And then I bought Busta Groove 2 as a Japanese import when I worked at the video game store around the corner from me. That's how I got
Nice.
my Japanese import games. And then I also bought Fire Pro Wrestling G, which was another wrestling kind of game that was only in Japan. Um,
Hmm.
but oh, and then how can I forget the SmackDown series also
I was gonna say the
on
SmackDowns were the
PlayStation.
ones I remember playing.
Also on PlayStation, absolutely amazing. Mortal Kombat Trilogy uh, was an unbelievable. And again, Sony had the edge because they had the codes in there so you can do the one button fatalities, which I absolutely loved, and Nintendo 64
Yep.
did not have that, and that always bothered me.
Yep. And we
But
rediscovered that not too long ago.
we rediscovered that not too long ago. Parappa the Rapper, another just wild game. And again, like you mentioned, the Crash Bandicoot series, the Rayman series. There are
Yep.
so many iconic games that came out on that PlayStation 1. So many franchises built off of that. Silent Hill, Parasite
Yep.
Eve, Alone in the Dark was on the PlayStation at a certain point. I mean, just yeah, it just we can talk forever about it.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Puzzle Fighter 2, Super Puzzle Fighter rather.
Super Puzzle
Um,
Fighter.
there was
Oh,
one of my things,
Chrono
my
Cross.
yep.
Chrono Cross.
One
I'm
of
just
the
like flipping through.
Now, of course, I mean, we were of the drinking age at this point, and one of my buddies he would come over and we'd play Need for Speed Hot Pursuit,
Oh
and we would
yeah,
have a couple of beers, and then what would end up happening is one of us would be the cop and one of us would be the other person,
nice.
and here we are, a little tipsy, trying to
Hmm.
pull the other person over,
That's all. Oh well, let's not forget also Grand Theft Auto. Grand
yeah.
Theft Auto started on the PlayStation 1, right? Grand Theft
Which,
Auto 1 and 2.
by the way, when I show my students what Grand Theft Auto used to look like,
Yep.
they're like, no. I'm like,
No.
yep, that's
Yep.
Grand Theft Auto.
Top down. It was top
Yep.
down, way long before Grand Theft Auto 3. But yeah, but again, so many memories we can talk about. But I mean, 30 years, uh, 30 years. I mean, what can you say about this console? If I still have mine, I will never get rid of it. I still have my PlayStation 1 collection. I actually just hooked up my PlayStation 3 so I can play my PlayStation 1 and 2 games because it's the backwards
Hmm.
compatible one. But yeah, I mean, anything else you want to close out with as we celebrate this 30th?
Like I just remember like sitting in my room with some like one some any one a number of my friends, and like we would take turns just playing like single player games like Resident Evil or Silent
Yep.
Hill or Tomb Raider, just trying to figure something out, or I couldn't get past something, you go, here, you do it, and then or
Yep.
vice versa. Um and again, I remember playing the Madden 99 to like I played that into the ground.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah,
yeah, that
the sports games on there were amazing.
yeah. Oh God.
Yeah.
No.
But all right. Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining me for this 30th anniversary celebration. I mean, I couldn't think of anybody better I can have on the show to talk about this because
Thank
I
you.
know your love for PlayStation. And for all you guys out there, join us in wishing the Sony PlayStation a happy 30th retro birthday.